Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. And by Real Good Foods. Real food you feel good about eating.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, diabetes nurse practitioner Michael Greenberg just ran the New York City Marathon with Beyond Type Run, a group of people with type 1 diabetes fundraising and training together. Why take on such a big goal?
Just to prove to myself that I was able to do this with diabetes counts a lot for me. It's a motivating factor where it's more meaningful to me to have done it in spite of diabetes.
Michael shares advice about running and training with T1D, about what led him to change his career path, and how his love of comic books and wrestling help him deal with diabetes. In Tell Me Something Good, a sports connection results in a real-life meetup one kid will never forget. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I am your host, Stacey Sims. So glad to have you along. If you're listening to the show when it first airs, it is the first week of December. Hope everybody had a terrific Thanksgiving. Now, in that weird time shifty thing that we do with podcasting, I'm actually taping this show a couple of days before Thanksgiving even. So I really can't say how our holiday went. Benny is definitely on crutches. He had his surgery. If you're in the Facebook group, I posted about that. In fact, a lot of you helped me on the day of the surgery, and thank you so much for that. Posting funny things and gifs and memes, and I really appreciate that. It helped me more than you might imagine. And I'm going to talk more about his surgery at the end of the show. Everything went great. I'm so thankful. But just a few details if you're interested in terms of how we manage diabetes. And of course, things never go the way you want them to go, but everything was fine. And he is doing really well, but 6 weeks on crutches for this kid. Oh, my goodness. But I'm really looking forward to this time, not because he's on crutches or anything like that, trust me, but because I feel like we're going to be home a lot more. It's going to be nice. I've been traveling a lot this year, and I know December can be busy for most people. But for me, I'm actually doing only one appearance so far in December, and I think that's probably going to be it. Not traveling anywhere far. Really excited about that. It's going to be fun to spend time with my family and my daughter home from college, a brief visit over Thanksgiving, and then she'll be home for almost a month over the winter break. So I'm really excited about that. I do have one event in the Charlotte area for the world's worst diabetes mom. We're doing a night out, and I'd love to bounce this off of you as you listen. We were going to do a mom's night out, like D-Mom's night out at a wine bar. But a couple of my adult friends with type 1 in the Charlotte area said, well, we want to come too. Like, we're always up for a good time. And it got me thinking, why not? So we changed the name of the event. So it's the world's worst diabetes mom. We're all the worst. And it's open to everybody in the diabetes community. And I've gotten a really good response. So if you've purchased the book and you're an adult with type 1, I'm curious to know what you think. Drop me a note. I'm going to ask this in the Facebook group as well, because I'm really curious to see if you've read it with your parents, if you've shared it with your parents. I mean, if you were diagnosed as an adult, that might be a little different. But if you were diagnosed as a kid, in your 20s and 30s or 40s now or older, so much has changed. But I think a lot of it, even though the technology has changed, a lot of the stress and strain and communication has got to be the same. So anyway, let me know what you think. And real quick on the book, if you want a signed copy, you have to order it through Diabetes Connection. So it's diabetes-connections.com. It pops up right on the front page. It takes about 5 days to ship. If you do want it signed, I will sign it for you, and then we send it out. If you want it from Amazon, I get it. Free shipping, very easy. I'm Amazon Prime, zip, super fast. But I can't sign them if they're on Amazon. So if you want that for a holiday present, please look at the calendar and make sure you do allow 5 days. I'm told they're coming sooner, but that's the window, and it's going to be at least 5 days once the Christmas packages and all that stuff go out. So thank you, everybody who's already ordered and requested. And remember, if you want it signed on the website, the very last page of your order, the page where you pay, scroll all the way down. There's a little box that says order notes, and you can type whatever you want in there. If you want me to sign it, to whom or what it should say or anything like that, or just say hi. All right. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneTouch. OneTouch has been a trusted brand in blood glucose management for more than 30 years. This past year, Pharmacy Times and U.S. News and World Report named OneTouch as a #1 pharmacist-recommended brand in blood glucose monitoring devices based on a survey of pharmacists nationwide. Find out more about OneTouch brand products at diabetes-connections.com and click on the OneTouch logo. My guest this week was diagnosed with type 1 as a young adult and now works in the diabetes field. Michael Greenberg is a nurse practitioner who works with people with all types of diabetes. He started running after his diagnosis and decided to try his first marathon this year with the Beyond Type 1 group, Beyond Type Run. Michael is also involved with DPAC, the Diabetes Patient Advocacy Coalition, and I really wanted to talk to him for all of those reasons, but also because I read a column that he wrote, and I'll link it up in the show notes, where he talked about his love of comic books and professional wrestling. And we talk about that in the interview. And particularly how comic books kind of help him in his mind make sense of diabetes and also explain it to his kids. Here's my talk with Michael Greenberg. Mike, thank you so much for joining me, and congratulations on the marathon. Holy cow, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, we have so much to talk about, but I got to jump in and just talk about the New York City Marathon. Was that your first marathon? How did it go?
Yeah, this was my first marathon. I have done a handful of half marathons before, but this was my first, and I figured New York was a good place to start. It could not have gone better for me. I think it took a lot of hard work and a bit of luck, and it went extremely well. I'm really grateful for that.
Wow. And you were on the Beyond Type Run team. This is the group from Beyond Type 1. Do you run together? How does that work?
So I think some people did run together. Anyone who had a diabetes logo or slogan on their shirt, I would dip up ahead and strike up a conversation with them. I did not start with anyone from the team. Most of the team took a bus in from the city to the start village, the marathon start village. I ended up coming in from a different area, but I did meet up with one of the teammates in the corrals, which was very nice to see before the race. And another one of my teammates found me on the race, which was very nice, and I ran with him for a while. And pretty much anyone that I could strike up a conversation with, especially if they were connected to diabetes, then I would run with them for as long as we could.
Wow. Did you have any bumps along the way? I mean, any real challenges, diabetes or not, during the race?
During the race, I think I was really fortunate. I didn't have any major issues. I did bring a lot of backup supplies. I was wearing the T-Slim X2 pump with the Dexcom G6, which we are sponsored by Tandem and Dexcom, so that was very nice to be able to wear those. A backup Libre on my arm. In the beginning of the race, you do 3 or 4 miles without even realizing it. I didn't realize until 25 minutes, 30 minutes had gone by that my pump wasn't talking to the CGM. I was trending toward a low. I didn't have a low, but I was trending toward a low when I realized it. I had about 3 energy gels and much less time than I would have liked. I avoided the low and sort of my numbers stabilized and stayed in a pretty good range for the rest of the race. Very lucky not to have any big bumps in the road.
That's great. All right, so I want to talk to you a little bit more later on about maybe some strategies and, how you plan for running and how you train for something like this, especially with type 1. But let's back up and kind of get to know you a little bit more first. When I was reading up on you, you said your diagnosis was mishandled. What happened?
Yes, I think this is common for a lot of young adults and people in middle age and older adults who actually have type 1 diabetes but are not started on insulin right away for one reason or another. And it could be that they have type 2 diabetes. I had symptoms for about 4 weeks before I went to see my primary care physician. The typical symptoms, excessive thirst, excessive urination, which I ignored until things got to be pretty extreme. And I actually only went to the doctor because I went to see a movie with my sister. We went to see Madagascar, the cartoon movie. It was about a 90-minute movie, and I couldn't sit through the movie. I had to get up and leave 2 or 3 times in this 90-minute period. And she looked at me like I was crazy for not having gone to the doctor already. So I made an appointment. I'm not sure how much time had gone by between calling and getting the appointment. Blood work was done in the office. I was called a couple of days later, came back in. I was given scripts for insulin but no syringes, never taught how to do an injection. I mean, luckily, he encouraged me to seek out a CGE. But I saw the CGE maybe a week later, and that's who really stood me back up on my feet and taught me the nuts and bolts of living with diabetes and connected me to endocrinology.
It's amazing how many adults are diagnosed, either incorrectly or not given any training or been any, help. When my son was diagnosed, we were in the hospital for 3 days. They wouldn't let us leave until we could show that we knew kind of what we were doing. It's incredible how different it is. You're kind of lucky that you found a diabetes educator.
Yeah, I am. I feel extremely lucky. And so I also credit her. So after I had such a great experience with her, I decided to go into nursing myself. She was really the inspiration for me going into nursing.
Were you a student already, or had you decided on a career? Give us the picture there.
So my first degree was in criminology and criminal justice, which I was not using at all. And I had decided to go back to school for education. So I had taken the GREs, and I was starting to apply to grad school to go back to become a teacher. And then at the beginning of the summer, that's when my symptoms developed. And by the middle or end of June, I was diagnosed. And by September, I was in a nursing program. So I pivoted from possibly teaching to nursing.
So what's it like to have type 1 diabetes and to go through the training and the education to become a nurse practitioner? I'm asking because I've been told by some of my friends who are nurses, and then their kids are diagnosed years later, that they got like a day or one page in a book about type 1. Was that the case for you?
How much education did we actually get? They cover a lot of information over not a whole lot of time. So I did my NP degree was over, I believe, 2.5 years part-time. In terms of like didactic or educational training in the classroom, we had probably a series of lectures, no more than 3 lectures though, on type 1 diabetes. And the rest you learn in the clinic from your preceptors and on the job. Yeah, so there's not a whole lot of time dedicated to type 1 in the classroom. Of course, they encourage you to read up on your own, but they have so much to cover. They don't, even 3 lectures I thought was a fair amount of time. And they also leaned on me for my input, which was very nice. And both in nursing school and going back for my NP degree, I was always happy to chime in to give my 2 cents about treating diabetes and living with diabetes.
I was going to ask if that came up, if you kind of raised your hand and said, no, this is really how it is. It's great that you were able to do that and that they welcomed it.
It is very nice to have a welcoming environment. Didn't have to ask my input, but they were always very happy to have it.
And so what do you do now?
So I am a diabetes nurse practitioner. I work in the Bronx at Montefiore, and I see adults with both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So anything diabetes related can come my way. I'm also paired up with a physician, and we have put a team together designed to see young adults with type 1 diabetes. So we call it the Supporting Emerging Adults with Diabetes Program, or SEED program. And it's really a transition program, moving people from pediatric care to adult care. So having type 1 myself, I get a lot of type 1 patients sent my way, whether they fit into that program or if they're older. I love diabetes technology, so I'm happy to talk to patients about that and serve as a resource in the clinic about that. In New York, working as a nurse practitioner, you can be pretty autonomous. I think I had great training from the hospital that I worked with initially as a diabetes nurse practitioner, and I've been able to carry that to my work over here.
Tell me a little bit more about that transitional program, because I hear all the time, it seems that is so necessary. I look at my own son, who is going to be 15 really soon, and, I think we can stay with our endocrinologist, the pediatric endocrinologist, for a while. It doesn't have to be 18 and you get kicked out. But he does have to transition, and it seems like there's a gap there. So what do you do? And how is that program going? That sounds great. Right back to Michael in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And we started with Dexcom back in the olden days, way before Share. So trust me when I say using the Share and Follow apps makes a big difference. Benny and I set parameters about when I'm going to call him and how long to wait and that kind of stuff. It helps us talk and worry about diabetes less. And if he's at a sleepover or away on a trip, it gives me so much peace of mind. It also helps if I need to troubleshoot with him because we can see what's been happening over the last 24 hours and not just at one moment. The alerts and alarms that we set also help us from keeping the highs from getting too high and help us jump on lows before they're a big issue. Internet connectivity is required to access the separate Dexcom Follow app. To learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Now back to my interview with Michael.
Ultimately, we want to meet patients where they are, and meaning we want to meet the needs that they have themselves. In terms of the transition programs and gaps in the program, there aren't a whole lot of programs in the country that do this, that are focused on bringing people from pediatrics to adult care. I mean, one big issue is that, we call it being lost to follow-up, where patients don't make it over. And we try to really bridge that gap. I mean, I think it's driven by just compassion and a desire to help this specific group.
What do you mean, though, by they don't make it over? You mean that when their mom stops making appointments for them to see the doctor 3 to 4 times a year, they're on their own and they don't see anybody?
That could be a big part of it, yeah. It's not always clear how often they're seen in pediatrics. Sometimes they follow up regularly. Sometimes they don't follow up that regularly. But the point is that we want to smooth the transition to a different practice. So if you had to transition from one primary care doctor to another, switching providers in general can be a stress and is a hurdle to getting health care. So switching providers from pediatrics to adult is a hurdle. And we try to smooth that hurdle or eliminate that hurdle. And the way we do that is we're in close contact with the pediatric team. We have regular calls with them. We have regular meetings with them. They've developed a specific note so we can review things and get the story on patients in a clear way before they come over to see us.
What are some of the challenges when a kid is, let's say, 18, 19, 20, 21? What are some of the challenges of transitioning from seeing a peds endo to seeing an adult endo? For the patient, what do you hear from them?
I think one big issue is how ready they are to, number one, make the transition themselves. They really want to switch their provider. And how much responsibility are they taking upon themselves? I think the approach from pediatrics to adults is different in terms of how much support and day-to-day support there is from like in the clinic visits and maybe outside of those clinic visits as well. But we want to really give them the support that they need. So some patients come to us and they are completely self-sufficient and they're doing wonderful. And we're so happy to have them, and we just want to keep things going in the right direction. Other patients maybe struggle a lot more with their diabetes education, with the resources they have available at home. I guess maybe without trying to give such a canned answer, it really does vary patient to patient. Some patients are doing really well off the bat, and we just try to keep that going. Some patients and families need a lot more support. I want my patients to be as self-sufficient as possible. I want them to understand the ins and outs of their diabetes the best they can so that they walk out confident in that they can take care of themselves no matter what curveballs are thrown at them. And that's what diabetes does to you every day. It throws different curveballs. Those issues, though, are going to be different for every patient, whether it's social issues at home, insurance issues, lack of diabetes education as a barrier to really understanding how to approach care. We really try to dive into what's driving their self-care to begin with to promote their own positive behaviors.
All right. So because this show is also my personal therapy, and I try to take advantage of every healthcare practitioner I talk to, what can parents do during the teen years, perhaps, to make the transition for their kids easier? Is there anything that you've seen in your experience? They say, oh, yes, when parents do this, that works out. I know every patient is different. I've only got Betty in my house for a couple of more years.
I don't have the clearest answer. I think, again, everyone's really individual, handing off responsibility as they are able. So if the parent is doing, like some parents might still be doing injections. Some parents are still asking, are you doing your finger stick? And to be honest, I've had diabetes for 14 years. I appreciate when my wife asks me, do I need help with anything? So there's always some level of help and some level of support that could be needed. But I think just taking steps as it comes to let them take on more and more responsibility themselves.
That was very diplomatic, by the way, about your wife, because I'm sure you don't want her saying, did you check, did you check, did you check, and following you around. But can I help you is a great way to put it. Exactly. I'm here to support you. And did you check? That's me.
Exactly.
I'm laughing about that. But you said earlier, and you're right, that there aren't a lot of transitional programs like this. Is that a question of, budgets? Is it recognizing the need? Do you think we're going to see more programs like this for young adults?
I hope we see more programs like this. Yeah, no, I really hope we do. I think the need is tremendous. I think probably a big part of it is budget. I don't believe endocrinology, a lot of things in the world are driven by money. I don't believe endocrinology is the biggest moneymaker for any institution. So the institution really has to believe in the program to put their financial backing behind it. We're really fortunate right now to have a provider, a physician that's driving this program that I've been partnered up with. And the institution has bought into her plan and bought into her vision. And I really hope other people do build other programs like this. The need is certainly there.
As I was reading up on you for this, I was really smiling to find out that you talk about comic books and professional wrestling, which I don't have as much of an interest in, but definitely comic books, as part of your diabetes story. So your two passions, you said before diagnosis, were professional wrestling and comic books. And I'm going to quote from a blog post you wrote, "Rewind to before my diagnosis when I had two passions, professional wrestling and comic books, both of which try to tell a story of good versus evil and triumph over adversity. Diabetes provided a great foil for me." Can you talk a little bit more about that? So the bad guy in your story is diabetes?
Right. Well, I don't know that I would call diabetes the bad guy in the story, but diabetes is certainly a motivating factor. And if I ask myself, why do I run? I run because it's healthy for you to a point. Why do I run long distances? I mean, that's because of diabetes. And it's sort of to prove to diabetes that you can't keep me down. Again, there are always so many moving pieces to manage. Running with diabetes or having some other challenge with diabetes, it's like a cherry on top of a sundae, where it's a very appropriate analogy with a high-carb sundae. Just to prove to myself that I was able to do this with diabetes counts a lot for me. It's a motivating factor where it's more meaningful to me to have done it in spite of diabetes. Some days you have great days and some days you have terrible days. And I feel like, I joke that I went into healthcare and diabetes care either because I lack creativity, or if I'm going to have to live with it, I might as well get paid. But living with it for 14 years and working in it for 7 years now, I still have good days and bad days. The victories are that much sweeter when I feel like I've overcome this extra obstacle. And that's what I think that diabetes really is. I think I also describe it as a frenemy, or fear as my frenemy. And it's really, I can appreciate a fear of low blood sugar. I can appreciate the fear of DKA. And those are certainly motivators for me to stay on top of things and to really try to beat the next challenge.
I'm curious, did you run before you were diagnosed with diabetes, or is that something you started after?
I really started after. After my initial diagnosis, I was running. I understood at that point that aerobic exercise, cardiovascular exercise was good in terms of managing your blood sugar and stabilizing your blood sugar. Well, at the same time, you need to stay on top of it because you could cause a low and you could also cause a high depending on what you're doing. About 5 or 6 years had gone by between my diagnosis and my first half marathon. And I think I was just looking for the next challenge, and I thought it would be really cool to run 13 miles with diabetes. So I had wrapped up my old glucometer with I took it out of the case. I wrapped up a few test strips to it with a rubber band, and I brought my lancing device, and I think I stopped twice during my first half marathon to check my blood sugar. And this is before I had a CGM. But after that, I would slowly find other long races to do. And since moving to New York, I've been in New York for about 5 or 6 years now. I've been a lot more active with the New York Road Runners, who put on a ton of races throughout the year. And with more use of continuous glucose monitors, this has made life so much easier. It's a great stress relief. I do believe that it's good for my numbers overall, even though some runs I end up low, some runs I end up high after. Yeah, so I really picked up running after my diagnosis.
I want to stay with the wrestling and the comic books for a minute. I'm hesitating because I want to get some advice for runners, and I will ask you that because I think it's really important as people are kind of learning how to do this. Everybody's body is different. But I also want to ask you, let's talk about comic book first, because you've got a great picture of you with your kids, and you're all dressed up like Spider-Man. So what's with comics? Is this something you had from when you were a little kid?
Yeah, I was just, what little kid doesn't like superheroes? And to me, professional wrestling is sort of like live-action comic books, which I don't actually watch much pro wrestling anymore. I don't like the idea of having to explain why these people are beating each other up to him. So I don't really watch pro wrestling much anymore. But in either case, I appreciate the spirit there. Yeah, it's, I like the stories. I like the bright, lively characters. And I like the gear they have. I was always a Batman fan growing up. And you see us all dressed up in Spider-Man. So I have a friend who's probably rolling his eyes at me because we always argued about who was a better superhero, Batman or Spider-Man. And here I am dressed up as Spider-Man now. Yeah, I love all the gear they have. And especially when you compare it to the gear I carry with diabetes. I have my insulin pump. I have possibly a meter. I have my CGM, my glucose tablets. I carry all that stuff on my utility belt, so to say. And again, if diabetes is my foil, that's how I fit that in.
One of the things that we used with my son I liked comic books growing up. I mean, I've talked about this before on the show. I kind of got out of it when I became a teenage girl and felt very out of place in comic book stores. It was just one of those. Back then, you were the only girl. It was very icky. But I have found, right? But it's a great way to tell stories, and it's a great way to talk to kids about things. And one of the things we've used with diabetes is that Hulk analogy. I've talked about this before, where when my son was too little to really understand, we could talk about, well, when you are high and angry, you're like the Hulk. But unlike Bruce Banner, it's our job to help you, unlike him, kind of figure out how to control it as you get older, because you can't Hulk out on people, So we would talk about it that way. Do you use those analogies with your kids to explain your diabetes?
I don't, but I think that's a great idea, and maybe we can work on a comic book together.
No! Well, all I can draw is stick figures, so it would really be a job. You'd have to do most of it.
I do try to teach my kids about diabetes. They understand that I need to dedicate a few minutes to myself whenever I change my pump site. They understand that sometimes I need to treat a low blood sugar and that I can't like roughhouse or run around or play with them as much as I would in the way that I would want to if I do have a low blood sugar. I need to take a small break. Yeah, so I try to educate them as much as possible to, I think, the level that's appropriate. Maybe making a comic book about it would be helpful.
Let's talk a little bit about running and diabetes again. I'm curious if, as a healthcare provider, I'm going to ask you to put that hat on and, take off your individual hat. If someone's listening and is thinking, okay, well, I can run a 5K. I've been doing this for a while. I've been thinking about a half marathon or a marathon, and they live with type 1. What is your advice? I'm obviously not asking for dosing and things like that because everyone is different, but how do you do it?
I think the best advice I have is to over-prepare. You want as much information as you can get about your blood sugar, and you want as many tools as you can carry to treat either a low or a high in case you need it. Before CGMs, I would always test my blood sugar before I ran or exercise doing anything. I'd always test my blood sugar after I ran, and then again a couple hours later. With CGM, it's much easier. I typically start by eating something before I exercise, and you could also, on a pump, you could do a decreased basal rate for a certain period of time. If you're on a pump, I generally don't like the idea of disconnecting it anymore because I just, myself and I've seen other patients, forget to reconnect it or forget to turn it back on. So I don't like the idea of suspending it or disconnecting it. I like to leave it connected if you feel like you need no insulin. With the more advanced pumps today, they'll suspend for you if you need. I do like a temporary reduced basal, which you could start like an hour before a planned exercise. That could be difficult to really fit into a schedule to exactly know, well, I'm going to exercise at 12 o'clock. I need to reduce the basal 1 hour earlier. I don't think most people function that way. I think it's usually more spontaneous. In terms of suspending, I would much prefer to do a temp rate of even 0 for, say, an hour or two, and then the pump's going to kick it back on, as opposed to disconnecting or suspending it altogether. So I eat beforehand, maybe 20 to 25 carbs. I carry energy gels or glucose tablets with me. And there's a lot of trial and error and experimentation to figure out what works for you. So in general, I've found that about every 3 or 4 miles, I need another energy gel, which is approximately 20 to 25 carbs. It also depends on what my blood sugar is beforehand. If my blood sugar is 120 to 150 or even 120 to 180, I don't eat anything before a relatively short run, and that has changed after the marathon for me. What's a short run? But if I'm doing under 5 miles, I don't eat before a run if my blood sugar is, say, 120 to 180. If I'm below 120, I'll have something small. If I'm over 180, then I might actually take a tiny correction to make sure my blood sugar comes down. But then you got to be careful for a low. So again, it's a lot of trial and error, making sure you have the knowledge of your blood sugar beforehand, during, and after, and then carrying those fast-acting carbs with you to treat a low in case you need it.
What do you use to carry your gear? Do you wear like a spy belt or a different, like a fanny pack? Are you a pocket guy, backpack?
Usually a spy belt. I'm a big fan of 2 brands of shorts right now, which have great pockets, Roan and Path Projects. One of the founders of Roan was actually captaining or co-captained our team for Beyond Type Run and was very generous providing us with gear. And Path Projects, I found, just had marvelous pocket placement. I don't think I could phrase it differently. So I was able to cut back on using the spy belt a little bit, and especially with my phone taking up so much space in the spy belt now, it's hard to fit everything in that belt. I'm a big fan of their clothing from both brands. And then on the really long run, so anything over 10 miles, I had, so a neighbor of mine was very kind. He lent me a heavy-duty foam roller, which I didn't run with, but I had used plenty recently, and also a hydration pack. So the hydration pack was amazing. I'd never used it before training for the marathon. And it has, you could carry all your water, you can carry all your gear, you can carry your phone, and your hands are free. And I really like having my hands free.
Not that you're already not busy enough, but you also got involved with DPAC, right? Diabetes Patient Advocacy Coalition. Tell me about why you got involved with them.
I just felt like it was time for me to take another step in terms of diabetes advocacy. And probably joining Beyond Type Run really pushed me to do that, because you're advocating online already. You're active on social media, and it really gives you an extra push. And I want to know, well, what else can I do for this community and for the diabetes cause? So I had heard of DPAC before at AADE in Baltimore a couple of years ago, and I just felt like they do phenomenal work. And I knew they had a day on Capitol Hill that I could possibly get involved with. So I joined them for their policy training and Hill Day a couple months ago. We had a wonderful time getting to know maybe a group of about 30 of us. They had taught us about a couple hot button issues in terms of in the diabetes sphere. They had a couple issues that they were focusing on that we were going to bring to the floor on Capitol Hill. And they had split us up into smaller groups, and we were able to meet with 6 or 7 different representatives, and not the actual representative, then their own staffers, to really promote these issues. So we were working on promoting the Affordable Insulin Approvals Now Act to really bring more biosimilars to the market. And the idea being that hopefully once you have a few more of these biosimilars, so think of Basaglar as a biosimilar to Lantus, Admelog as a biosimilar to Humalog. Once enough of those are on the market, the price should come down. So we want the FDA to keep looking at these drugs that are in the pipeline to get more on the market. Then we're also promoting a bill to expand access to diabetes self-management training. And that was really a very warm group, exciting group to work with. And I would hope to keep working on advocacy with them or with other groups.
That's great. I think there's a lot of times we feel like we can't do anything, we can't make a difference. But DPAC is really pushing the envelope on that. Going forward, do you then continue working with them? Is that training kind of now you have the tools on your own, or do you continue to work with DPAC?
Right. So I think there are opportunities for both. So I feel more empowered now to reach out to my representatives on my own. And I also would love to join them again on future trips to Capitol Hill. And walking around Capitol Hill was really an empowering and uplifting experience. When you have so many issues with diabetes to manage day by day, the staffers that we spoke to really listened to you. They really cared about what you had to say. And it wasn't just us. The place was packed with groups promoting their own causes. But knowing that there are so many people out there going to Capitol Hill to make their voices heard was really an uplifting experience. So yes, I plan to try to make my voice heard in my own community and with DPAC again, and hopefully other organizations as well.
All right, before I let you go, I do have to ask you, watching you on Instagram leading up to this event, to the New York City Marathon, there was some pie issue. What was with the pies? You were fundraising with pies in the face?
Yeah, so we each had a fundraising goal, and in order to keep pushing, so for me, fundraising was as stressful as training for the marathon.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Yeah, to keep it fun for me and to give myself another push late into the marathon training season, I thought that I could make myself laugh, make my kids laugh, hopefully make some people online laugh by offering to take a pie in the face for every $100 that I had raised up to a certain point. So I think I was at $3,800, and I said, okay, well, until I hit $5,000 for every $100 that I raise, I'll have someone pie me in the face. I actually said my buddy who lives in the city will do it, and he did one of them, but that was quite a trek, so I've had other people pie me in the face instead. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And the Cool Whip is really low carb, so it's not a big problem there.
Yeah, we did a pie in the face thing, and you learned, you can't use a real pie. That gets very expensive and messy and heavy. You got to go whipped cream, Cool Whip, make it quick in a pie tin, or especially if you're doing every $100. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what dollar marker people would be excited to reach. I figured $100 was attainable. I didn't expect to have to take 12 pies in the face. So I still owe people 5 more pies, and I'm going to be visiting family over Thanksgiving. I think I'm going to let my nieces and nephews and kids finish me off.
Perfect. And make sure to post that. We'll link it up.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, my gosh. Mike, this was so great. Do you think you're going to run another marathon? Was this a one and done, or do you think now you have the fever and you want to do it again?
I absolutely want to do it again. I am one race away from qualifying for next year's New York Marathon. My wife was pretty supportive of this one. I think she will be, again, pretty supportive of the next one. It does take a lot of time away from family, so I really give her a lot of credit for all the extra work that she's done. But yeah, so New York Roadrunners has a 9+1 program where if you do 9 of so many of a set of races and you volunteer to work at one of their races, they'll give you a spot in the next year's marathon. So I do plan on running again and hopefully fundraising again. Yeah, so I do look forward to it. And this is a couple of years after I said I would never do a marathon, and I told my wife to never let me do a marathon. Yeah.
What were you thinking back then? Was it a diabetes thing, or you just thinking I could never do that? Why did you make that statement?
It was a diabetes thing where I felt like I had done the half marathon and I had proven to myself that I can manage my blood sugar and be healthy and have a good time running 13.1 miles as a half marathon, and that I didn't need to prove it to myself that I could do anything more. And I think running an occasional marathon is fine. I'm not so sure about the long-term health effects of running marathons repeatedly. It was a great time. Honestly, this was one of the best days of my life to run the New York City Marathon, and I really look forward to doing it again. I don't think I have it in me to do more than one a year, even though I told my wife the day after that maybe I'll do 2 a year. She looked at me like I was crazy.
Well, you can put it in comic book terms. You have your weekly issues, and then every once in a while you get a supersized.
Exactly.
You don't want to do that too often.
Yeah.
Michael, thank you so much for joining me. It was great to get to know you. Best of luck going forward. And definitely post those pie pictures. We want to see them.
I absolutely will. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I've been a fan for a long time, and it's wonderful to speak with you.
Thanks so much.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
As we mentioned during the interview, Michael was fundraising using some pies, right? He was going to do pie in the face for every particular monetary goal he hit. A few years back, we did something similar. I want to say Benny was in 5th grade. And oh my gosh, that was one of the messiest days of our lives. I will link up a video. I'm going to put it in the Facebook group. I'll put it in the show notes too, but I'll put it in the Facebook group. It's probably the best way to link it up, about the Pie Benny Day at his elementary school. And it was a day, it was just a mess, but it was so much fun. And it was also long enough ago that I had time on my hands to create a very fun video. So I'll link that up so you can check it out. And Michael, good luck to you, man. Those pies, they're fun, but they're a mess. I'll also link up more information about Beyond Type Run, and I will link up Michael's column that he wrote, the one that I mentioned a couple of times, talking about superheroes and type 1 diabetes. Time for Tell Me Something Good, brought to you by Real Good Foods. And one of the things I like so much about Real Good Foods is that it is easy to find. And if you're not sure, you can just go to their website, and then there's a store locator, put in your zip code. It'll show you exactly where you can find them in the grocery store or Walmart freezer. They do have free shipping for orders over a certain amount, and that's helpful if you want to look at the entire catalog of products, because our local grocery store, I go to Harris Teeter, and they always have the pizza, but they don't always have some of the other products that we buy. Same with Publix. I kind of have to mix and match, and Walmart has different products too. So if you want to get a sampling or buy more, just go to their website and you can kind of mix and match that way. But I like having good food. I mean, it's Real Good Foods. It's the name of the company, but it really does taste good. Low in carb, high in protein, and super easy to just warm up and prepare. Find out more. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Real Good Foods logo. This week's Tell Me Something Good comes from my local Facebook group, and this is all about Kai. He is 9 years old, and he was diagnosed at age 3. And we have a UNC Tar Heel. So this is Chapel Hill, which is over near Raleigh, so the eastern part of the state, not in Charlotte, but, close enough. we have a Tar Heel football player, Bo Corrales, with type 1. And Kai has been dying to meet him. Kai started researching him, his mother says, a few years ago. Bo was diagnosed in 7th grade. He played basketball and football. And Kai has recently gotten into football, and he wants to be a wide receiver. And he didn't realize, this is before he realized that that's Bo's position. So obviously this has got to happen. So the mom is using her local connections. She knows somebody in the gymnastics program over there. And, they kept working their way around, and they arranged it so that Bo and Kai could meet. And not only that, but Bo gave Kai the gloves that he played the game in. And he talked to Kai about, what to do to stay healthy, to stay fit, to play football on the college level, and possibly beyond. And his mom said, I'm telling him the same exact things, but it means so much more to him coming from this college football player. So thanks, Elizabeth, for sending that in. That is fantastic. And I'll link up some information about Bo because, it's amazing. There's so many kids now with type 1 diabetes playing sports on the college level. And of course, we know of some on the professional level as well. But not that long ago, people were told, no, you can't play sports. You'll never make it. You can't keep up. It's not good for your body. And this is not ancient history. We're talking 2000. Just a little bit before that, maybe. I know so many people personally who told me at their diagnosis, they're not going to live to be 30. And if they try to play sports, it's not going to work out for them. It's going to be worse on their body. So to come so far in really a short period of time is remarkable. I think it's to the point where a lot of our kids are interested when they find out somebody with type 1 is playing sports, right? Especially if like Kai, he's playing a sport you want to play in a position you want to play. But it's not like us as parents where we're like, wow, that's so cool. I love it. I want to talk to the mom and I want to find out how they did it and all this stuff. I think that our kids, hopefully, have never been told that they can't. So it's exciting to see someone with diabetes playing, but it's not the same revelation that it might be for somebody that's our age. I just think that's so interesting how it's changed and quickly. Oh, I love it. Do you have good news? I would love to share it with our audience. Just let me know. You can email me, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com, or ping me on social media, or put it in the Facebook group, whatever works for you. I am in the middle of redesigning the show for the new year. It won't be too different, but just some changes here and there. And the Tell Me Something Good spot was new for 2019. I think I may continue it. I'll be asking about that online in December, getting some opinions, but I really like it. And I hope you do too. So let me know what you think. Should we continue it? In the meantime, send me your stuff. We got a couple more shows before 2019 is over. Tell me something good. Before I let you go, a little bit about Benny's surgery and just how it pertains to type 1 diabetes. He tore his meniscus. So this was a bucket meniscus repair. I'm learning all about what this stuff means. Outpatient surgery. We were assigned a surgical center. Of course, we met the surgeon many weeks ago because he's the one who diagnosed Benny, had him have an MRI and go through all this stuff. But he is somebody that was recommended by the wrestling coach. Of course, I checked him out as the mom. And, he came very well recommended and knows Benny has type 1. So, of course, I called our endocrinologist and got all the instructions there. So the big concerns, of course, are no food or drink after midnight, the day of the surgery. So what happens if you go low, that sort of stuff. The endocrinologist told me a couple of sips of Sprite were better than glucose tabs if we did have to give him something, which I thought was interesting. But of course, to back off on the insulin, he wanted us to do a temp basal rate of 10% less. So on the T-Slim, that comes out as a 90% basal rate for the hours after midnight. Had a plan, didn't meet with the anesthesiologists or try to in advance. I felt like I could talk to them when I saw them that day. I know from other surgeries that I have had and my husband's had, you always get to meet with the anesthesiologists and talk about your concerns. And those are the people that I really want to understand everything, right? I always tell them, and I truly believe it, you are the most important person in that room. I should also tell you that Benny had dental surgery, very minor dental surgery when he was 3, the kind that you or I could probably handle with just a local, but because he was so teeny tiny and they had to get back there, they did a general anesthesia for him for that. I will believe until the day I die that it was the diabetes, undiagnosed, raised his sugar, did damage to his teeth because of that high sugar, because I was terrified at the time that he was going to have cavities and problems with his teeth his entire life because, we're treating with juice boxes and he's going low all the time. And oh my gosh. And, what are we going to do about the brushing in the middle of the night? Kid's never had another cavity. So I absolutely believe that it was the undiagnosed type 1 swirling around in his body for a while that damaged those teeth. I mean, they fell out. They were baby teeth. He's fine now. But we learned about anesthesia and diabetes at that time. It was also a time where he didn't have a CGM and I didn't have Facebook. So I'm laughing because I was a lot less scared than I probably would have been now. Isn't that amazing? But they were wonderful. They checked his blood sugar during the procedure. And then they brought me right back as soon as he was out. Usually the recovery room, they don't let you back there right away. And I'm telling you, there's a good reason they don't want you back there right away. It was not pleasant, but they wanted me to check him and administer insulin through the pump if need be. They couldn't have been more wonderful and accommodating. And his blood sugar as a 3-year-old was fine. So I had that in my mind, that good experience. And now we have a CGM and we've got this cool insulin pump and all this different stuff. So I was calmer than I would have been if I'd never done this before. Of course, the night before, Benny has a pump inset issue. He's at wrestling practice. He's still going to practice. He's not doing the full wrestling, but he can lift and he can do upper body stuff. So he's still going to wrestling practice. He's 400 when he comes home. And we had been texting that afternoon and I had seen that there was an issue. And I said, let's just fix it when you come home. But of course, then the fear is you're going to put so much insulin that it's going to crash. So I said, let's be really conservative, and I had the food planned out for the night just to make sure things weren't going to be wonky. But that stupid 400, that really, we did not need that. That happened so few and far between now. Of course, it had to happen that night. So my plan is, before he goes to bed, we'll see what the pump recommends we give him, and we'll give him 2/3 of it. But of course, he's being conscientious, and he gave himself the full dose before I even went to say goodnight. So I'm picturing now he's going to be low all night. What the heck are we going to do? I went to bed. Of course, I didn't sleep. I'm watching the CGM all night, and he's fine. He's fine. He woke up. We had to wake up at 4:30. He woke up at 95, and we're getting ready to go out the door. And he said, you know what, Mom? I feel like I'm going to start to go a little low, so I'm just going to do a 0 basal for the next couple hours, and let's see what happens. Great idea. So he did that, and I figured we can keep an eye on it. Who cares if he goes a little bit high today? It's going to be a crazy day anyway. He's 95 the whole time. We're getting to the hospital. We're checking in. We go back. They put the IV in. He's 93. He's 96. He's 93. He's 95. He's 94. He's 96. It didn't move. And then right before he went back, he popped over 100. So at that moment, I grabbed his pump and I said, okay, you haven't had any insulin for almost 2 hours. Let's give you an 80% temp rate, 20% less than usual, so that after the surgery, you're not a billion. We didn't want to keep the insulin off for that much longer. Okay, great. We had already talked to the anesthesiologists. We had decided that they were just going to look at his insulin pump. He put it in the pocket of his hospital gown, very fashionable hospital gown. And the T-Slim has the CGM on the screen. So we showed the anesthesiologist how to wake it up. Just press the button on top. You can see the blood sugar number there. I'm in the waiting room. They can come get me if anything's crazy. The surgery's less than an hour, so I figured that's the best way to do it. A lot of people told me the anesthesiologists will keep the kid's cell phone, in the operating room. I decided that was not a good idea. First of all, I'd rather them look at the pump. It's a lot easier to wake up the pump than put the code into Benny's phone. He's got a 6-digit phone, or maybe it's facial recognition now. I don't even know, although it is a 6-digit code because I check it all the time, so I do know that. But much easier to just look at the pump. And why do I need to monitor from the waiting room? What the heck am I going to do? If he goes low, by the time I tell the receptionist to get the nurse, to get the orderly, to get the they already know the thing's alarming. So I figured much better to just have them look at the pump. The surgery was supposed to take a little bit less than an hour. So of course, at an hour and 4 minutes, I am having a heart attack. I was calm throughout, but once we ticked past an hour, I was in full crazy mom mode. I was so nervous. 1 hour and 6 minutes, they came and got me. Everything's great. Blood sugar's great. He's doing great. Everything's fine. And it was, and he was. Blood sugar had drifted up to 130, stayed there. I think with the pain and stuff, of course it floated up to about 200 by the time we got home. But really, blood sugar hadn't been an issue, wasn't an issue for the next couple of days. I was so thankful for all of that. We're doing temp basals like crazy, of course. He's sitting around, and he's got pain and he's got stress. But the operation itself was terrific. And it's so fun. Well, maybe it's not fun. It's not the right word. But I love talking to the healthcare providers when they're receptive to it. And everybody, from the nurse that checked us in, took his temperature and all that, to the surgeon, the anesthesiologists, the aftercare people. They were interested and engaged, and they wanted to learn about his technology. It was fantastic. I mean, the funniest part was the very last nurse we saw who discharged us shared that her son and her granddaughter have type 1 diabetes. And I opened my mouth, and Benny, who is totally out of it, right? He's just trying to wake up enough to go home. He whispers to me, "Mom, no promotion." And I almost died laughing. I was going to tell her about our local Facebook group, but her son is not local and neither is her granddaughter. I was dying. No promotion. Like I'm going to whip out my book. Hey. Oh my God, that kid. I shared some of this in the Facebook group. And what was nice was we had an adult who is having surgery soon, and she was able to ask questions and get advice from other adults who've been through surgery. My only real bit of advice is that bring somebody with you. We all need an advocate in the hospital, whether you have diabetes or not. So much more difficult to do this by yourself. And I wish that all of you can have somebody with you. And if not, push and advocate. You can be a pain in the butt patient, but it really is the best thing for you to do. So thanks for all of the well wishes for Benny. I will keep you posted. Like I said, we're a little time shifty here. So by the time this episode airs, we're really almost 2 weeks past this surgery. And I'll be posting some updates, but he does appreciate knowing that you guys are all thinking about him. Oh my goodness. All right. We've got a couple of episodes left this year. I will let you know in the next week or two exactly the schedule. My best guess right now is that no show week of Christmas, and then a very quick show the week of New Year's. And then we're going to kick things off in 2020. Holy cow. Thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. And thank you very much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.